Prime Minister's question.
The member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister indicate how soon the government intends to restart services with the cardiac catheterization lab at the Scarborough General Hospital?
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too, like my colleague from Couva South, read the papers as I read them today and yesterday, and would have seen this article which has triggered this question. I can advise the House that the Secretary of Health in the Tobago House of Assembly will be meeting with the CEO of the Tobago Regional Health Authority on Monday, 14th of February 2022, to discuss the matter and chart a way forward. This is the matter that is under urgent consideration and action by the Tobago House of Assembly.
South.
Prime Minister, as the head of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, are you aware that on the 16th of March 2016 that a contract was executed with Caribbean Heart Care Limited and it was terminated on September 2017, the 30th? Are you in a position to inform this House why that said contract was terminated?
Member, that question doesn't arise. Member for Couva South.
And Prime Minister, based on what you have informed this House in relation to a meeting which will take place on Monday coming, could you make an undertaking to ensure that there is adequate staff as it relates to the operation of this particular lab facility in Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, what I've just said holds. This matter is a matter that is being attended to, and such commitment and undertaking as requested by my colleague can only come from the Tobago House of Assembly and the Regional Health Authority in Tobago. You know, Madam Speaker, if I do otherwise and poke my nose at that depth in Tobago, he will be the same person to get up and accuse me of interfering in the running of the affairs of Tobago.
Member for Couva South.
At the risk of being accused by the Prime Minister of poking or getting him to poke into the affairs of Tobago, Madam Speaker, Prime Minister, could you also ensure that there is value for money as it relates to this particular issue, because the information at hand...
Ask the question. You've asked the question. Okay, and based on the questions you've asked before and the answer that has been elucidated, this cannot qualify as a supplemental question under the standing orders. Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, given the proposed restructuring plans of TSTT, will the Prime Minister inform this House of how many workers will become unemployed as a result of the said restructuring exercise?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is important to note that TSTT is not simply a state-owned company. TSTT has a 49% ownership by Cable and Wireless, a private company. And restructuring is not only about jobs, it is about the business that those entities are engaged in. As I said before, consistent with the collective bargaining agreement that governs the relationship between TSTT and the union representing its workers, the management of TSTT and the Communication Workers Union are currently involved in restructuring discussions on the future sustainability of the organization. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is not part of these discussions, and therefore it will be imprudent to comment on any matter that any of the parties choose to put out in the public domain. We continue to wish the parties a successful and productive consultation in the best interests of the organization, Madam Speaker.
Member for Vancouver South.
Prime Minister, given the current financial status of TSTT in relation to a loss of $453 million in the last financial year, could you indicate to this House where the government intends to raise the requisite financial sum to support any retrenchment as a result of the restructuring exercise of TSTT?
Madam Speaker, as I speak to you and this House now, there is no issue of retrenchment in front of the government, and those numbers that are being raised and bandied about and coming from these particular sources are to be taken as hearsay. The government, as a major shareholder in this company, will get its information at the appropriate time, and only then, Madam Speaker, will these issues be in front of the government. Certainly, it is not in front of the cabinet at this time. I have just indicated that the government is not a part of these discussions. TSTT is not the government. TSTT is a company that has a major shareholding by a foreign private sector company, and these discussions are to take place in those quarters, and anything arising out of those discussions will then find their way to the shareholder of the 51%, which is the people of Trinidad and Tobago, at the appropriate time, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima. Sorry, Member for Vancouver South.
Yeah.
Member for Vancouver South.
Prime Minister, could you inform this House from a policy point of view at the level of the Cabinet if the government is prepared to advise the board and management to engage in a voluntary restructuring exercise as opposed to one of forced retrenchment at TSTT?
Madam Speaker, anyone who is responsible in this matter will know that it would be very inappropriate for the government to so instruct the board, especially to do so publicly at this time in an organization which has a 49% minority shareholding. What is he asking the government to do? This is a PNM government. We do not act irresponsibly.
Member for Vancouver South.
Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and that TSTT owns approximately 100% of Amplia, which is a subsidiary company of TSTT. Could the Prime Minister inform this House how Amplia staff will be affected by this said restructuring exercise?
Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister, this question doesn't qualify as a supplemental question.
Any member knows it?
Member for Naparima.
Will the Prime Minister explain to the House why Major General Edmund Dillon has not presented his credentials thus far to the government of Venezuela 6 months after being appointed?
Madam Speaker, the appointment of an ambassador is a process. Any ambassador in any country, coming from any host country. With respect to Major General Dillon, that process has been followed, is being followed, and there's no problem with it. His Excellency Major General Edmund Dillon, retired, he received an instrument of appointment in August 2021, appointing him as Ambassador of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Ambassador Dillon arrived in Caracas on the 4th of February 2022. Ambassador Dillon presented a copy of his credentials to His Excellency Felix Plasencia, Minister of People's Power for Foreign Affairs of Venezuela on Tuesday, 8 February 2022 at 11 a.m. The mission is awaiting word and an appointment for the presentation of credentials to the President of Venezuela. Madam Speaker, the delay in the departure to Venezuela was due to the implementation of urgently needed works at the residence in Caracas, including significant repairs to the roof and thorough cleaning of the premises to ensure that the ambassador is safely and properly accommodated during his posting. Further works will be completed, including painting, replacement of items, and security systems upgrade. The ambassador presented the copies of his credentials to the Minister of People's Power for Foreign Affairs on Tuesday, 8 February, and is awaiting the scheduling by the government of Venezuela of the formal event for the presentation of letters of credence.
Member for Naparima.
Minister, could you not have used your excellent relations with the President Maduro, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, to fast-track the receipt of confirmation of the credentials?
I'm glad that you know that I have excellent relations with Venezuelan authorities. Madam Speaker, that's exactly what I did. In my communication with the Vice President of Venezuela, the presentation of credentials of Ambassador Dillon has in fact been expedited.
Member for Naparima.
Does the fact that there are daily demonstrations in front of our Caracas mission emphasize the need for a resident ambassador to improve relations with the people of Venezuela as opposed to the government?
Member, again, that does not qualify under the standing orders as a supplemental question. Member for Naparima.
Will the Prime Minister state what diplomatic steps will be undertaken to contain the fallout from international reports suggesting that this country is not treating its Venezuelan refugee migrants humanely?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the first thing we'll do, and I do it here now, is to ask the leader of the opposition and her minions to cease and desist from badmouthing this country.
The Prime Minister could do better with his language.
So, Prime Minister, might I ask, in light of the context of the question, that you withdraw the word and use a word? I rule it unparliamentary in the context of the question.
Madam Speaker, is the word minion unparliamentary?
In the context of the question being asked.
You can't stand here and insult people.
Madam Speaker, I don't know why my colleagues...
Prime Minister,
I'm not speaking to them, I'm speaking to you.
Prime Minister, I'm on my legs. Member of Cuba South. Member for Cuba South, I'm also on my legs. Okay? And I would ask all of us to uphold the dignity of this House and be a little more respectful about our processes. I'm not...
Minister, start.
Member, I'll ask you to just stand up, apologize for that outburst, and we'll continue.
Madam Speaker, I apologize.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, as far as I've made a ruling on minions in the context, if you will withdraw that word, and let's proceed.
Madam Speaker, I withdraw the word minion, and I trust that I will never use it again in this House. Madam Speaker, I want to repeat what I've said, which is parliamentary, and that I intend and I am asking the leader of the opposition to cease and desist from badmouthing our officials who act from the Coast Guard in this matter. And secondly, Madam Speaker, right, to say what has been done so far, immediate condolences and sharing of information from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs went to the Foreign Affairs of Venezuela. Immediate condolences and sharing of information between the Minister and, of course, Madam Speaker, we have our ambassador talking to Minister Plasencia during presentation of credentials on this matter. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs issued a series of diplomatic notes to the government of Venezuela. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs issued, on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, an invitation to a meeting of the leadership of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard with the counterparts from Venezuela next week. There has been the initiation of investigations involving the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard and the Trinidad and Tobago Police. And Madam Speaker, I myself, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, have sought and spoken directly to the Vice President of Venezuela on this matter as I continue to stay in touch with our officials here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Prima.
The Prime Minister, are you using our expensive lobbyists in Washington to contain the negative fallout in the Washington Post, from the Al Jazeera, from the UK Guardian, to contain the international fallout?
Madam Speaker, the hysteria around this matter being driven by our colleagues and others is no different to what happens in the Mediterranean, to what happens in the Gulf of Mexico and the coast of Florida, between Bahamas and Haiti and Cuba and the United States. Why are our people trying to put a rope around the neck of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in a matter which is purely accidental, which is minuscule as compared to what is happening worldwide? The main fallout from this is the leader of the opposition accusing the Coast Guard of murder. And I have nothing further to say on the matter. So you might as well keep your seat.
Madam Speaker, I rise on 48.4, based on the utterances of the Prime Minister to my colleague, the member for Naparima.
Member for Naparima.
Mr. Prime Minister, given numerous negative headlines in the international media, not done by the leader of opposition, concerning the treatment of migrant refugees, should we not have had a well-publicized guideline and framework governing interactions between our border security officers and migrants?
Member, one, it's not an opportunity for you to make a statement, and this is not a question of opinion. If you have a question, pose a direct question.
Should we, Prime Minister, not have well-publicized guidelines to govern the interaction between our border security officers and migrants, as they do in the United States, UK, and Canada?
Madam Speaker, since the member wants publicized guidelines, which exist, where the problem is publicized, I would answer by quoting for the member, Madam Speaker, from a document from Venezuela called Gender and Crimes, dated 11th of February, it's very recent, by Venezuela Investigative Unit. And it says, Madam Speaker, with respect to the very people that he's claiming to want to defend, says that some stay in the south while others head to the north and the central region, many to the borough of Chaguanas, where the demand for prostitute thrives. And Madam Speaker, the document goes on to say that the expert reported that unlike other countries, such as Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, where human trafficking had been on decline, demand for sex and prostitution in Trinidad and Tobago is being driven by a high rate of local consumption, especially in the borough of Chaguanas. Madam Speaker, that is representative, and my colleagues in here, if you want to fight this matter, let us begin by fighting this.
Member for Naparima.
Given what you have just said, Prime Minister, do you not see the need for a well-thought-out, comprehensive, consensually development, a policy that recognizes our international treaty obligations, to have a framework for all the nonsense that is going on with the Venezuelan?
Madam Speaker, it is precisely because we have a comprehensive policy and physical responses against the background of that policy why we have an effective border patrol through our Coast Guard interacting with the problem, for which the perils sometimes, Madam Speaker, involve people being drowned, people being lost, people being hurt, people being shot. So I don't know what policy he's asking for, but I'm asking for a policy to reduce your appetite for the corruption that is in this document.
Member for Cuba South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister provide the House with a status of the Cabinet-appointed subcommittee to review the operations of the Water and Sewerage Authority, as well as to determine a strategy? Madam Speaker.
Members, I know questions usually involves a lot of animation, but I would like to hear the question being posed by the member for Cuba South. Member.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I will start over. Will the Prime Minister provide the House with a status of the Cabinet-appointed subcommittee to review the operations of the Water and Sewerage Authority, as well as to determine a strategy for enabling the authority to achieve its mandate.
Prime Minister.
The work of the subcommittee is ongoing, and it is at an advanced stage. However, the government will report to the national community on its plans for the future of the authority after all consultations have been satisfactorily completed. Madam Speaker, the government has always been transparent with the national community with respect to the state of the Water and Sewage Authority and its intention to transform this important utility company in the best interest of all our citizens. This transparency, Madam Speaker, was powerfully demonstrated by my government's decision to lay in this Parliament the report of the Cabinet-appointed committee to review the operations of the Water and Sewage Authority, as well as to determine a strategy for enabling the authority to achieve its mandate. I wish to commend the report, Madam Speaker, to my colleagues opposite for the reading and edification. As previously done in 2020, by making this report public to the national community at an appropriate time, the government will return to the country to indicate its plans for the transformation of the authority when the preparations have been satisfactorily completed.
Member for Couva South.
Prime Minister, based on the instructions you gave to the Minister of Public Utilities at the public meeting in Laventille over the weekend, could you inform this House, in the compilation of this report, which was dated the 11th of December 2020, did the National Trade Union Center and the Joint Trade Union Movement meet with this Cabinet subcommittee?
Madam Speaker, as I just said to this House, the process is ongoing, people are meeting, and discussions are taking place.
Member for Couva South.
And can you give this House the assurance and the employees of WASA that the Cabinet subcommittee will meet with its recognized majority unions, being the Public Services Association and the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, because the labor federations have no role in this particular exercise?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I don't know why the member for Couva South is taking it upon himself to advise the government. The government of Trinidad and Tobago knows its responsibility, and the Minister of Public Utilities is in the process of meeting with these entities in the way that he has suggested. Thank you for your advice, but it is wholly unnecessary.
Member for Couva South.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister will make his utterances, but at the end of the day, yes, I will.
Remember, okay, there's no need for all the preambles, and we are today, okay, operating on the basis of tolerance, respect, okay, and we trying to avoid the innuendos today. You yourself asked for that earlier. So could you stand up and ask the question? 15 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, could you give this House the assurance that this said report will not be discarded like the one as it relates to the restructuring of the Port of Port of Spain and also Lake Castle Company of Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, the premise is wrong, and therefore the conclusions must be wrong. No report has been discarded. None, especially the two that you have just mentioned. It is just your attempt to create mischief as usual.